all by itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
There are days when we need unstoppable energy. A lifeline to face down challenges so that we can soar. In those critical moments, we dig deep, and life's emergencies require unstoppable power. Unstoppable dedication to safety and high performance. It's in these moments that we are unstoppable together. Concord, the heart of your aircraft.
Tom Brokaw called the 16 million of us the greatest generation. But we weren't the greatest generation. The nation of America was the greatest generation, because what we did was rebuild Japan into a democracy and rebuild Germany into a democracy. The two enemies that we had became our best friends, and the people that I fought it with became our enemies. Russia.
You cannot place statues or build memorials in thin air. These airplanes, rescued, restored, returned to the sky, are the memorials. Through them, we give enduring thanks to those who gave everything they had to defend everything that we hold dear. By sharing them, we remind each other of the sacrifice. By sharing them, we introduce our heirs to their heritage. One week each summer, these national treasures are flown here. Twice each day, those who restored them present them to those who risked their lives to fight in them. And those who really did it tell the rest of us how it really was. It is a singular series of history lessons that anyone who cherishes liberty ought to see. As a young neurosurgeon just beginning his career, Dr. Tony Beechler was a busy man who wasn't really looking for an additional passion to come into his life. But when the P-51 appeared on his life's horizon, his personal trajectory would never be the same.
I just saw this plane for sale in 1985 in Trade-A-Plane, back when there was no online anything. And actually, my first airplane ride was in the backseat of a P-51 of a doctor out in Iowa where I went to medical school, and did a preceptorship with him. And he said one day, "Let's go to the airport." And I said, "I don't know, never been in an airport before." And what are we going to do there? And he said, we're going to fly my plane. And I said, great, never been on a plane. And he had a P-51, Burns Byram was his name, and flew down, and I thought, man, I got to have one of those one day. It took a few years, but it happened for me. And I've had it 29 years. It's painted in 352nd Fighter Group paint scheme, but I have since discovered that this airplane was actually in World War II in the 15th and the 12th Air Force in the spring of 1945 in Europe, in the Mediterranean. And this could be the sole surviving Tuskegee flown airplane that survives. There's only about 15, maybe 20 European combat veterans that survive. All the rest of them were left, that exist today, were left surplus and stuff. So this was in the 15th and 12th Air Force. Just one of the groups was the 332nd Fighter Group, which was the Red Tail Tuskegee Airmen. If anybody has any information exactly of the serial numbers that those guys had, if I could find out as the exact World War II paint scheme, I would repaint the airplane. But for now, I'm leaving it the way it was because I like the 352nd Blue Nose. Anyway, it's a great plane for 29 years. It's my honor to pay tribute to all the veterans and their sacrifices over the years. And being a veteran myself, it's nothing's closer to my heart. So that's why we keep doing this.
Jerry Ellen was one of the thousands of pilots who were not sent to fight in Europe. As the armed forces of the United States began to take the war to the Japanese homeland, he and his squadron mates from the 78th Fighter Squadron found themselves escorting B-29 bombers on long-range missions over the ocean as they took the war to the Japanese home islands.
A lot of people don't know that we had a war over Japan. The war in Europe is pretty well known. Just a little background about me. I was born in 1924, February 15, 1924. And in 1929, the Depression came along, and I lived through the Depression. And I had a scholarship to go to college when I graduated from Hillside High School in New Jersey in 1941, but no money to pay for books or housing, so I took a job in Crucible Steel, making 37 millimeter shot for bundles for Britain. This was long before we went to war. And then on December 7th, I decided that I wanted to become a fighter pilot, and on my 18th birthday, February 15th, 1941, I signed papers, had my mother and father reluctantly signed papers, and I became an aviation cadet in waiting. I had 3 months of training in the military procedures in Fort Dix. I went to Nashville, Tennessee for classification, where you learned whether you could fly or be a bombardier or be a navigator. And I soloed on February 22nd, 1 week into my 19th year, in a Stearman at Thunderbird Field in Maricopa County near Phoenix. And there were 68,000 people who lived in Maricopa County. Now there's 3.2 million people living there. When I did my cross-country in that Stearman, I landed at the crossroads of Mesa, Tempe, and Chandler, which were just bare property. There was nothing there. And I graduated from Luke Field in August of 1943 with 10 hours in a P-40 and was sent to Hawaii to get 50 hours. And I joined the 78th Fighter Squadron and then never left that 78th Fighter Squadron. I was there for the entire time with them. In December of 1944, our squadron flew our P-51s to Ford Island. We watched as they were put on board below decks and on the deck of a cheap aircraft carrier called the Citgo Bay. And about 4 or 5 days at sea, we were called to a briefing. We were shown a relief map of an 8 square mile island called Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima was necessary for fighters and for a place for the B-29s who began bombing Japan in November of 1944 from the islands of Saipan, Guam, and Tinian. Those missions with the B-29s were 16 hours, 14 to 16 hours up and back. The casualty rate was about 40%. So on February 19th, 67,000 American Marines invaded the island of Iwo Jima, where there were 23,000 Japanese defenders, 90,000 soldiers fighting on 8 square miles of land, and 28,000 of them were killed. We landed on March 7th. The smell of death, the sights of bodies all over, and the sounds of war are with me still to this day. For 1 month, March 7th, March 8th, until April 7th, 1945, we strafed for the Marines until they took the island, which was a 39-day battle for them. On April 7th, 16 of us in the 78th Fighter Squadron escorted B-29s when they dropped their bombs on Tokyo. On the way up, we flew on the wing of a B-29. We had no navigation abilities whatsoever. What we did have was a U and a D, an Uncle Dog. For those who don't know about it, but we used to navigate over land flying a beam. You had an A quadrant, a Dada, an N quadrant, Daded, an A quadrant, Dada, and an N quadrant, Daded. And when those Morse codes, Dada, Daded, came together, you got a solid sound. Well, U in the Morse code is Didada, and D is Da Didit. And so the B-29s broadcast what we called Uncle Dog out of the back of a B-29. We could pick it up for about 30 miles. And that's how we navigated if we couldn't literally see the B-29. We navigated on an Uncle Dog. And we had to focus our gun cameras on the tip of a cloud or on the tip of a mountain so that when we evaluated our gun camera film, every time we pulled that machine gun, shot our 6 machine guns, we were taking pictures in color. So I focused, on April 7th, I focused my gun camera at 21 years old on the tip of Mount Fuji, which is the icon signature of the nation of Japan. And I said to myself, what the heck am I doing here? Well, I knew what I was doing there. And I watched a square of fire being made on Tokyo, and then 140 B-29s came in, no targets. They just dropped their bombs inside the square of fire, and little fires became big fires. I was at 22,000 feet. The smoke and the debris came up. Not once did it ever occur to me that there were human beings on the ground. These were our enemy, genuine enemy. And I was happy, thrilled to be a part of the destruction of that land. That was the first mission. Our CO, Jim Tapp, shot down 4 Japanese Zeros on that day. And then on April 12th, 1945, on the second mission, he shot down his 5th and became the very first ace in the war over Japan. The missions were 8 hours long. We could fly up 3.5 hours, 3 hours, depending upon the winds, on 2 external tanks, drop our tanks, fight until we had 90 gallons of fuel left. The first guy that had 90 gallons in any squadron called in, and that was the signal for the squadron to head out to sea to pick up the B-29 that would navigate us back to Japan. I did that 19 times. I flew the first mission, April 7th, 17 missions in between. I flew with 16 guys who didn't come back. You know, what can I say? The pure purpose of my war, the pure purpose of all war, the pure purpose of a warrior is to learn how to kill. And that's what we do in war. We kill our enemy. And that's what I did. That's what our guys did. And that's what we were trained to do.
With the end of World War II, the millions of men who fought the war returned home to the States to resume their lives. But not everyone was ready to resume civilian life. Their lives had been forever changed by what they saw and what they experienced. Jerry Yellen was just one of the many who came home a very different young man.
The scars of war, I think there was a man named Plato who was an ancient philosopher, said, only those who die in war do not suffer from war. I was 19, 20, 21 years old, been in combat, saw the remnants of 28,000 people, flew with 16 guys who didn't come back, and I came home and I was a basket case. I didn't know who I was. I flew with the Air National Guard of New Jersey, and I was looking for people to kill because it wasn't an airplane I was flying, it was a weapon that I was flying. And I became addicted to an activity that was like killing to me. I couldn't go to work. I just couldn't do anything that was what we would call a normal life. Although I met my wife Helene on a blind date in Good Friday, 1949. We got married in October 1949, so you're a little off by 4 years. It'll be 65 years this year in October. And I played golf to kill a golf course, to kill the guys I played against. I wasn't a very nice guy. I gambled. And then in 1975, my wife saw Maharishi Mahesh Yogi on television talking about transcendental meditation. And she learned TM, and then in self-defense, I learned transcendental meditation, got my life back. In 1932, when I was 8 years old, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected the President of the United States, and he was the only president that I knew until the spring of 1945 when he died. And in January of 1941, before his inauguration, he spoke in a speech about the 4 freedoms of America. It's known as the 4 Freedoms speech. If you've never heard it or never read it, it's worthwhile looking up on Google. The first freedom of America, as defined by the Constitution, is the freedom of speech and the freedom of expression. The second freedom is the freedom of worship all over the world, for any God that you choose, for any religion that you choose. And the third freedom was the freedom from want. We should all be able to make a living, we should all be able to help ourselves, and there shouldn't be any anger in what we do. And the fourth freedom was the freedom from fear, the freedom of fear of being attacked by other countries, and the freedom from fear of having our country do anything to other countries. And that's what democracy was as I grew up. And that's why I was willing to give my life to fight for this country.
Captain Jerry Yellen came back from World War II a different man, but the love of his family and their willingness to help him look beyond the experiences of his war has helped him see a different world.